We live in an age where there are hundreds of thousands of sample packs on the market. The options are seemingly endless for any kind of sample or preset or sound design asset that you could be looking for. You've got everything from small companies like us at Make Pop Music who do boutique sample packs, all the way up to giant corporations who have subscription models for a la carte samples that you can download individually. And while there are seemingly endless options for samples, not all samples and not all sample packs are created equally. There is a massive range of sample libraries and sample packs that you can actually grab and download. You're going to have everything from sample packs that kind of really focus on sampling things like an acoustic drum kit, where there are different kit pieces recorded hundreds of times, chopped up, mixed, and then loaded into something like a contact instrument or a VST. You have sample packs that were really kind of inspired by vintage synthesizers and vintage drum machines, where those actual machines are sampled and then modernized with mixing and with sound design. You have sample packs that were created completely in the box with synthesis and sound design, and those can be really, really fun and interesting. And then all the way on the very end of the spectrum, the ones that you're going to want to avoid are the sample packs where companies will unfortunately just take samples that they found in other packs, kind of repackage those and call it a sample pack, and then you end up downloading it, spending 30 bucks on it or wasting a bunch of credits on it, and realizing that these are the same trap snares that you have in 14 other packs. These are the same electronic kicks that were going around in the 90s, and that is really what we want to avoid, especially here at Make Pop Music when we're making sample packs. With that said, we do have a ton of stuff on our website, and we're really, really proud of everything that we create. And with that said, we've had a ton of questions on our actual process on creating a sample pack, especially because we kind of do a blend of the first three techniques. So we do have instruments that are completely multi-sampled and live tracked. We have instruments that were recorded from live sound and Foley. We have sample packs that were recorded completely with synthesis and sound design. And then we have some sample packs that we actually sample vintage instruments like, vintage synthesizers and drum machines. And then we really kind of modernize those. So in this video today, what I want to do is I want to show you what the process of creating a sample pack is, just so you can kind of understand. So we're going to go over like the planning, how we structure a pack, how we actually create a kick sample from scratch, so you can see my kind of sound design process. And then by the end of this video, you'll know everything that at least goes into a Make Pop Music pack. Now, I'm not sure if this is how every other company does it. I know there are going to be companies that spend much more time, effort, and money because there are much bigger undertakings than, a small little one-shot sample library. And I know that there are also companies that, like I said before, will just kind of accumulate samples, repackage those, and sell those. So I really, really love our samples. They're really boutique. They're always really, really inspiring and unique. And I want to kind of show you how we kind of get those onto the market for you guys. So let's dive in and let's start looking at our process of making a sample pack. So the first thing that we do whenever we're coming out with a new pack, whether that's samples or presets or MIDI or even like a chorus, is me and Miranda. Miranda is my wife who also co-owns Make Pop Music with me. She's the one who edits all of our videos. And she is really our project manager, and she went to school for marketing. So she kind of handles all of that back end stuff for us. We'll go and we'll sit down at something like a coffee shop or a brewery or a wine shop, and we will just discuss different ideas that we could do for upcoming products. This is a note sheet that we have from our initial meeting for the Y2K pack. That's our pack that we just dropped a couple weeks ago. If you want to check it out, it is available at makepopmusic.com, as well as all of our other sample packs and preset packs. That's the only plug I'm going to do for us, but this is kind of what we develop when we start constructing a pack. So Y2K is a little bit different because this one was actually completely Miranda's idea. She got inspired because we just did a Vital pack called Synergy right before this, and there's a preset in there called Moneymaker, and she was editing a video where I used it, and it kind of inspired her to just think about that old Ludacris song Moneymaker that's from like 2003, 2004. And I think she kind of realized that in the late 90s and early 2000s is coming back really, really hardcore. We've got Y2K coming back in fashion. We've got it coming back in media. We've got nostalgia really hitting with people like me who are in their, mid to late 20s, early to mid 30s. And we did a little bit of market research, and there weren't really any packs that kind of relied on those sounds of the late 90s and early 2000s. So after Miranda came up with that initial concept, we sat down and we started kind of brainstorming what Y2K would be. So we did this on April 15th. We wanted to release late June, early July, which is exactly what we did. It came out on July 3rd. The pack needed to be complete by June 20th just because there's other stuff that we'll talk about. And then we kind of come up with the pack vibe. So we wanted sounds inspired by the late 90s and early 2000s. We wanted to focus on pop, hip hop, and R&B. And then we kind of write down some references. So this is where we'll just sit and spitball. If we're going to construct sounds that are inspired by a certain genre or a certain group of artists or a certain aesthetic, what is that going to be? Just because we want our packs to kind of be anchored. If you go on our website, you'll notice that most of them have either some kind of genre description or artist description or general vibe. And that's just so the consumer can know what they're getting. So if they're looking for a specific pack for something, they don't have to kind of second guess what every pack is. So we come up with our references. And then I'll kind of make a gear list of things that were used from that artist or in that time, or different techniques that we could use. And so for this one, we needed like some vintage synthesizers and drum machines. We needed a Triton, a JV1080, a MPC 3000. Sometimes we will, just buy things for these sample packs. Sometimes I will hire out people to actually sample their instruments. Sometimes we don't actually use these instruments. I'll just go through and I'll find different like walkthrough videos or vintage videos or manuals and kind of hear what they sound like. And I'm able to completely recreate that from scratch. So, like the Triton, I didn't want to go get a vintage Triton. What I did is I went and listened to a bunch of sound examples and then did my best to actually mimic a lot of those. So we'll kind of do that, and then we'll come up with whatever the pack is going to contain. So this one was samples and vital presets. I'll kind of divide that just so I have a running list of, things that I need to stay on top of. That way I'm not just throwing everything at the wall and then trying to assemble it and, make that a pack for you. I want to make sure that everything that we're doing is pre-thought out, just so we can deliver the best pack possible. So once we come up with all of that, we'll kind of talk about the visual direction and the branding for this one. If you've seen the box, I'm super, super proud of it. We did like a early Y2K kind of 2000s inspired chrome aesthetic. We hired an amazing graphic designer, our friend Molly Buck. She came up with, all of the text graphics, all of the background graphics. She did a custom drum machine for us. And that was all Miranda's job to kind of hire her out. So this pack really was Miranda's baby. It was her idea to do Y2K. The whole visual direction was her. Hiring out graphic designers was her. And then after that, we really just talk about the schedule. So for this one, I wanted to do 20 samples and 10 presets per week until we had enough to kind of assemble them into a pack, right? So after we do that, that is when I actually start figuring out who we need to hire. So this pack was really simple. I made all of the samples and presets, but we have other packs where we've hired sound designers, we've hired programmers, we've hired session musicians, and there's kind of a trade-off where if we have a big pack where we hire a lot of people, it kind of takes a lot of the load off of me. However, we spend a lot more money. And when we release a new pack, it's never guaranteed how it's going to do. So we've had packs cost thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it's really scary because me and Miranda are the only ones behind Make Pop Music. We don't have investors. We don't have funding. We're not like this massive, massive, massive company. So it's always scary for us to invest money. And then on the flip side, it's scary for me to invest time, right? I've got production clients. I've got other Make Pop Music work to do. So it's kind of a balance of figuring out which projects I want to take and put my sound on and which ones we want to kind of hire out, but still be kind of the spearhead of the project. So Y2K was pretty much all me. The only person we hired was Molly to do the box design. But, sometimes we've got people who do tutorial videos. Sometimes we've got people who help us with manuals. So just keep that in mind. This one was a small undertaking from us, but we spent like 2 months on it, where if we hire out a bunch of people, we can get a pack done in like 3 weeks. It just takes a lot more money. Once we have the kind of initial concept of the pack and I know exactly what I need to create, I'll spend the first kind of couple weeks kind of just sampling a bunch of different things. I'll record a bunch of different samples myself. I'll go and I'll find those vintage synthesizers and drum machines so I can actually start sampling those. And what I do is I kind of create all of these source sounds. And then what I'll do is eventually end up using those source sounds to kind of create what are going to become the samples in the pack. So I don't like to just sit down and kind of macro construct every single sample one by one. I like to kind of spend time, if I want to record some beatboxing sounds that I can layer, I'll record those one day. If I want to, sample my Roland down here, I'll do a day where I sample everything on that, chop that up, organize that. It's a lot of kind of monotonous task of like hitting the C chord a lot. Or, just kind of recording the same thing a lot. When we do drum sample libraries, we hire a guy named Tomas. He has to hit that snare drum like 100 times. And doing this allows you to create samples that you can take the best take, the best quality take, the one that has the best attack and decay, and then you can start to construct those. So what we'll do is initially kind of come up with recorded sounds, sampled sounds, synthesized sounds, and then I'll have folders of all of those. And then when I start actually creating samples, then I can go in and do the nitty-gritty sound design. So phase one is just accumulation of kind of raw assets. And then stage two of sound design is actually starting to layer things, mix things, process things. And I want to show you how we create a kick drum, right? So I figured, what good is this video if I don't at least show you our process? So here is a good example of a kick that I made for this video where we're going to use synthesis, we're going to use recorded sound, and we're going to use sampled sound. So here is the synthesis. We have this instance of Serum right here. I've got a sine wave, and I've got this wave over here. I've got envelope 2 controlling the octave, and that's going to give us kind of a kick sound, and then we've got a cutoff filter. It's a pretty simple sound. Let me turn it up a little bit just so you can hear. a nice kind of subby kick. A lot of the time, even in our samples, even if we're gonna kind of sample vintage instruments like we did a lot for Y2K, I like using synthesized subs because I find them clean, I find them super controllable, I can tune them, I can mix them. It just gives me a nice base where I'm not having to record something that's from 1988 and that sub is kind of degraded. Maybe the jack that it's using is not in 100% fidelity. So especially for low end, a lot of the time we will synthesize this, because now I can play it all over the key. And so I can do that. I can adjust the attack and decay, and that kind of becomes the basis for most of the sub of our sound. So I'll take something like that and I'll print that out. And then a lot of the time I will record audio. So sometimes it's tambourines, hi-hats, me smacking a desk, me doing beatboxing. Here was me just doing a kind of mouse sound. We have that synth drum. And then I wanted to do something that was kind of MPC inspired. So I took an MPC sample that we had from when we sampled one, and I just kind of pre-mixed this. So the synth and the recorded audio don't have any pre-mixing, but this MPC drum does. Here's what it sounded like straight out of the MPC. It was a little bit longer. I just chopped it off a little bit. So we're going to shorten that up. And then I'll always kind of initially start with some EQ, especially to get rid of some of that sub since we have that synthesized sub. We're going to scoop out some mids and we're going to boost some top end. This is different for every single sample. Every sample is going to have individual mixed layers, and then I'm going to show you how we kind of construct those into one big kick. We've got a little bit of saturation. And then we have the pawn shop compressor. This is my favorite compressor for kicks and snares. This is just going to add a little bit of poke and transient and kind of control that decay. So here's what it sounded like before any processing. Here's what it sounds like after. So now we have this kind of nice, boxy kind of room sound. We're going to take that, and here is what we ended up with the recorded sample. So I took it, added greenhouse to kind of spread it out, because a lot of the time if I do high transient stuff, I'll add a little bit of width just so we have something that feels interesting in the sample. And then we are doing some EQ. So here's what that initial beatbox sound ended up coming. And you can see that we have shortened this a lot just to be a transient. And then I have that kick sub that I had printed from Serum. So we have all of those put together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to comp that down into one kick. So here's that one kick. We're going to start with some Pro Q. I'm going to cut out just a little bit of those subs just so it doesn't decay too gnarly. Take out like a very, very, very small amount of 212. And then just do some EQ up here just to make it really punchy and fun. After that, I like doing a multi-band envelope shaper. This really allows me to construct a sound. So we're dragging out the sub a little bit. We're shortening up that mid punch. We're shortening up the attack on the top end. Here's what it sounds like without, with. And this is kind of how you get different sounds. If I wanted it to be more like a MPC kind of Timbaland sound, I'll drag this midsection out. You can really kind of get creative, especially with multi-band envelope shapers. And then the last thing that I like using, and I use this on a lot of our samples that we've done over the past like year or two, is use Knock by Decap. I find this is just like the ultimate finishing for drums. Even a lot of the time in my sessions, if I have samples that we've done and we've mixed, I'll still use this. So I'm adding a little bit of punch, a little bit of saturation, some sub, some air, and the coolest part is this clipping right here. And this is going to make it really loud, really punchy. Once I have all of that, then I will print the final kick sample, and you get something like this. And most of our samples will peak around like -0.5 to -0.1. I have them as loud as possible, so you can always turn them down if you want, but they have that ultimate punch in there. So we've got -0.5. And that is how we construct a kick sample of 3 initial layers, a synthesis layer, a recorded audio layer, and a sampled instrument layer. Mix those individually, combine them together, mix them together, get a final kick. We do this for every single kick and snare and hi-hat and cymbal. Sometimes they are much more involved. Sometimes they're much more simple. Sometimes they heavily rely on things that we sample. Sometimes they heavily rely on synthesis. I wanted to show you an example that was kind of equal parts everywhere just to really show you. But this is the actual session of our Y2K pack. So this is all of the sounds. So I construct them all over here, and then I'll drag them. So kicks get dragged here, snares get dragged here, yada, 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 all the way down. It ended up being over 500 samples. The next part that comes is library organization. So once we have all of these samples, what I will do is kind of pop them into these folders, and I'll come up with some kind of naming scheme for how they're going to be. So the Y2K pack was the name Y2K underscore what kind of instrument it was. So 808 underscore descriptor. So we had mangled. And then for the 808s, I would just put what root note they were. So A, G, etc. So, you know, we have kick, dumpster fire. And sometimes we'll just do kick 1, kick 2, kick 3. For this one, I actually asked you guys what you wanted to see on Instagram, and you gave me your opinion. This is the naming convention that y'all wanted. So we took time to do that, organize them out, and then we actually have to go through and we have to export every sample. So we'll make sure that the tails aren't cutting. We'll make sure that we kind of cut them at an appropriate length. And then once we've done all of that, we will organize them into folders. So once we start printing them, we have the folders here, 808s, claps, cymbals, effects, etc., all the way down. And that's just so you can easily find them and locate them. And again, this is kind of our normal convention for packs. So we have samples here, we have vital presets here. Vital presets and serum presets are kind of the same thing, where we'll spend a lot of time at the beginning sampling vintage synths to create noise tables, and then we will create some wave tables, and then we'll spend weeks of just combining different sounds, doing a bunch of different processing, figuring out how many effects we want to use. So it's all kind of this trial and error, right? There's not a tried and true way to create a sample. Every single sample is different. You know, some are super electronic, some are super acoustic, some need to be multi-sampled, some are one-shot. It really, really just depends on whatever that sample pack is trying to accomplish. Once we have organized and optimized the pack like that, the next thing to do is just do some beta testing. So I want to make sure that we don't have anything clipping, we don't have any weird clicks and pops, we don't have any issues where samples are showing up empty, we don't have duplicates, and we'll send them out to some beta testers. So we have a handful of people that we'll send every pack to before we release it, just to make sure that everything is good to go, and I'll use them. And then most importantly, I like to start using them in productions pretty much immediately, because just because a kick sounds good in solo does not mean that that's going to sound good in an actual mix. Sometimes the transients are too hard, sometimes they're too soft, sometimes the snare has too much mid-range, and so a lot of the time I will use almost every single sample in a pack in some kind of example just before I can kind of figure out if they're done. So, you know, I'll create a song, I'll try 14 of the snares just to make sure that they all kind of work. Granted, they're all going to have a different vibe, but I want to make sure that no matter what you pick in the pack, everything will at least fit into your mix without you having to kind of reinvent the wheel and completely mix them from scratch. We leave room where you can add your own EQ and compression and saturation, but I don't want you to have to completely mix every sound from the ground up. And so that is how we kind of optimize and organize our pack. The next thing that comes is actually prepping it for release. So the first thing that we need to do when we're getting ready to release a pack is work on the visuals and the branding and the design. Typically, once we start a pack, we'll kind of come up with that initial design that we want for the main box, and either I will do it or we'll hire out a graphic designer. So we've hired our friend Clay Agnew for things like Poptopia and producer principles. I've done a lot of them myself. We hired Molly for this last one, and we'll be working with her again in the future. And we like to kind of have that box going as the pack is being done, because that can kind of inspire me in terms of what kind of aesthetic I want these sounds to have. And it just helps to start promoting it even if the pack isn't 1,000,000% done. So once we have everything, we'll kind of get that box done. And then once we have that box done, we will kind of focus on creating the kind of secondary graphics. So Instagram graphics, YouTube graphics, you know, email graphics. We'll work on doing some little short reel advertisements, stuff like that. So once we get all of the visuals and everything done, this is our final release checklist. So we want to make sure that the pack is finalized. Beta tester said everything works good. The boxes and the visuals are finalized. We want to upload the pack to our website. I can kind of show you how that works really quick. To upload our packs, we just upload them all to our website. We use a Wix website for makepopmusic.com, and it just allows us to kind of have our point of sale in there. So we're going to upload the zip file of the final pack, and then we're going to just add all of our info. We write a description for everything. We upload the box. We select which part of our story we want this to show up in. And then other than that, then we will just work on like pricing, inventory, things like that. And once we do that, we can have it shown in the online store. We'll typically hide it until it's released, save it, and then we'll show it the day that it releases. So once we've done the pack description and we've uploaded the pack, then we have to do pack examples. Sometimes we'll hire these out. Sometimes I'll do them all myself. So like this one, we did like an NSYNC style song. We did like a Backstreet Boy style ballad, and we did like a Pharrell style hip hop song. We'll probably work on more examples in the future, but I wanted at least 3 kind of complete songs where you could hear Y2K in action. And then in addition to that, we'll also do a walkthrough YouTube tutorial where I kind of show you everything in the pack. I kind of explain what the vibe of the pack is, why we made the pack, and I show you a ton of the sounds without any extra mixing or any extra kind of pizzazz. So you can hear the source sounds straight out of the pack. Kind of gives you another instance just to understand what you're buying before you buy it. After that, we'll do Instagram graphics, like I said, Facebook graphics. We'll do the walkthrough reel. So it's basically just a version of that YouTube video as an Instagram reel. Then we'll do a couple Instagram promotional videos just to make sure that we have those for the week that it releases. And then we like to kind of promote our packs passively by using them in our YouTube videos. So we don't spend a ton of money on advertising. We're not one of those sample companies that is constantly on your Instagram feed, or is constantly in your email box, or is constantly rolling as a pre-roll ad on YouTube. We really like to highlight our samples by actually using them practically, and we do that by kind of hosting tutorials that can give you a lot of value without having the samples, and they kind of use the samples so you can passively hear them. So for this pack, for example, we did like a how to make an NSYNC style video that came out a couple weeks ago, and the how to make a Pharrell style video that came out last week. And then, you know, it just gives you a chance to hear everything. So we'll do those, and then we'll set up our email plan for the pack. So we have to make all the graphics for that, schedule that, etc. Once that's done, on the actual release day, we make the songs public. We make the YouTube video public, we set the pack to visible, we get that email out, and then we just post it to all of our socials. We'll update our All Sounds bundle. And then after that, it really just kind of maintains itself. So the only things we have to do is if we have people hit us up with issues, like if there was a click and a pop that got through, or if there's a download issue, we'll fix that all on our end. But other than that, once the pack is uploaded, it's kind of there for the world to have. So, you know, anybody can find it anytime on our website. If you're ever looking at Make Pop Music samples, all of our samples are only available through our websites. Unfortunately, there are going to be companies out there that will pirate or that will sell fake copies. People get ripped off, they get their credit card info stolen, they get fake samples. So definitely don't do that. Make sure that whenever you're buying samples, you buy them directly from the company or a legitimate website that is a third-party distributor of samples. But with that said, that is everything that goes into creating a sample pack. Again, we use the Y2K pack as an example for this video. However, you know, when we did the Anderson pack, it's a completely different workflow because we hired a session drummer. He had to record everything. We hired a contact programmer. So keep in mind that this is how to create samples from scratch. This is how to kind of construct a sample pack and market a sample pack. But every single library is going to be different. It really just depends on what you want to do, the sounds that you want to deliver, the quality of sounds that you want to deliver, and what your audience is kind of looking for. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, because this pack was kind of Miranda's baby and she kind of constructed it from the ground up, our main way of making sample packs is really just like polling our YouTube channel and our Instagram. So we'll ask you guys on YouTube, or we'll ask our Instagram. It's just Make Pop Music if you don't follow us there, what you want to hear. So a lot of our packs are just fan service. It's exactly presets that people want, samples that people want, MIDI progressions that people want. And we do it because we have the means to actually create these. And selfishly, I want a lot of these tools for myself, right? So I'm going to use all of the samples that I create because while I hope they do well on the website, if I can get value out of them, then it takes a lot of that pressure on how they perform commercially off, because now I have all of these samples that I can use in my own productions. So even if the pack doesn't do insane, it's okay because I at least have an asset that I can have. So all of our sample packs are kind of really created with our audience in mind. And, you know, I think most companies are like that, but I don't think every single company is like that. I think a lot of people just try to find holes in the market, and that's not a bad way to do it either. You just have to kind of figure out who your audience is, how you want to market it to them, and what kind of value you want to give to them. But that does it for this. If you want to check out any of our sample packs, you can head over to makepopmusic.com. We have a ton over there. Electronic sample packs, live acoustic sample packs. We've got preset packs for Vital and Serum. We've got MIDI progression packs. We have a start to finish production course. And we put the same amount of time and energy and care into literally everything that we've ever made. So if you want to check it out, you can go over to makepopmusic.com. There are other amazing boutique sample companies to check out. So, you know, I'll shout a couple out. If you haven't, go check out Echo Soundworks. They're amazing. You can go check out Ash Taylor. All of his samples and presets are amazing. You can go check out That Sound. There are a bunch of really, really, really cool sample and preset companies that actually do give you something completely new and not just the kind of same recycled 808 and 909 samples and presets that you've heard a million times. So put some time and energy into finding some amazing companies, because you can get some really, really, really good finds. But other than that, let us know in the comments down below what videos you want to see in the near future. We always take your requests. Let us know what kind of sample packs or preset packs or production assets in general you want Make Pop Music to create next, because we are looking for our next pack to develop. And then other than that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. We will be back next week with much more content, but until then, much love, peace.